Aiden Harris was a young, charismatic man with an undeniable charm and a deep-rooted ambition to live a life of luxury without lifting a finger. At 25, Aiden had grown accustomed to a life of ease, pampered by his parents who provided for him well into adulthood. But as they watched their son squander his potential, Aiden's parents decided it was time to cut him off, forcing him to find his own way. Faced with the reality of fending for himself, Aiden begrudgingly took a job at a local cafe. He hated the menial work, the routine, and the modest pay, but he had no choice. Still, Aiden couldn't resist dreaming of the wealth and status he craved, and he soon realized that his charm and good looks could be his ticket out of mediocrity. One day, while he was grudgingly serving customers with his usual apathy, a sleek black limousine pulled up in front of the cafe. Aiden barely glanced up until the cafe door swung open, and in walked a distinguished woman, exuding an air of sophistication and wealth. Her name was Evelyn Blake, an elegant woman in her late 60s, draped in designer clothes and adorned with exquisite jewelry. Accompanied by a driver and a personal assistant, Evelyn's presence commanded attention. Aiden's demeanor shifted instantly. His usual indifference was replaced by a warm smile as he greeted her. "Good afternoon, ma'am. How may I assist you today?" he asked, his voice laced with a newfound politeness. Evelyn ordered a black coffee for herself and a latte for her assistant, and Aiden swiftly prepared the drinks with an unusual level of care. As he handed Evelyn her coffee, Aiden seized the opportunity to engage her in conversation. "You seem like someone who has accomplished a lot in life. I'm trying to find my way, and I'd love to hear any advice you might have for someone like me." Evelyn, intrigued by the young man's charm and apparent sincerity, smiled and offered him her business card. "If you're serious about finding your path, give me a call," she said, before leaving the cafe. That evening, Aiden could hardly contain his excitement. He saw Evelyn as his golden ticket to a life of opulence. The very next morning, he called the number on the card and was invited to an interview at Evelyn's company. Not knowing what position was available, Aiden eagerly accepted. The following day, he arrived at Evelyn's office, impeccably dressed and ready to impress. Evelyn, who usually left interviews to her HR department, was intrigued enough by Aiden to meet with him personally. She was captivated by his eloquence and the ambition he projected. Despite his lack of experience, she saw potential in him and offered him a position in her sales department. Aiden quickly proved himself to be a valuable asset to the company, not through hard work, but through his persuasive charm. He landed several lucrative contracts, impressing Evelyn and her colleagues. He was rewarded with promotions and perks, and Evelyn began to take him under her wing. As their professional relationship grew, Aiden began to implement the next phase of his plan. He showered Evelyn with compliments, took an interest in her life story, and slowly began to weave a web of charm around her. He knew that if he could win her heart, he could eventually gain access to her wealth. Evelyn, who had spent the last decade running her late husband's business empire, was flattered by Aiden's attention. Her husband had passed away years ago, leaving her without heirs, and she had buried herself in work to cope with the loneliness. Aiden's companionship brought a sense of vitality back into her life, and she found herself enjoying his company more than she expected. Aiden continued to play his role perfectly, taking Evelyn to lavish dinners and indulging her in new experiences. She began to see him not just as a protege, but as a close companion. Eventually, Aiden took a bold step and asked Evelyn to be his girlfriend. Despite her initial hesitation, Evelyn, charmed and perhaps a little lonely, agreed. As their relationship blossomed, Aiden's true intentions remained hidden. He envisioned a future where he would marry Evelyn, wait a few years for her to pass away, and then inherit her vast fortune. He justified his actions by convincing himself that it was his destiny to live a life of wealth and power, even if it meant deceiving the woman who had given him everything. Evelyn, however, was not as naive as Aiden believed. Although she enjoyed their time together, she noticed subtle changes in Aiden's behavior. His extravagant spending, his growing arrogance, and the way he spoke down to others began to raise red flags. She also noticed that he was often away for long periods, claiming to be working late or meeting clients, yet offering no details. Despite her suspicions, Evelyn kept them to herself, watching Aiden closely while maintaining the facade of a doting partner. She decided to take a subtle approach, hiring a private investigator to follow Aiden and uncover the truth. The investigator reported back with shocking information. Aiden was leading a double life, squandering Evelyn's money on lavish gifts for another woman and spending his days partying instead of working. Heartbroken and humiliated, Evelyn realized that Aiden had been using her from the very beginning. Evelyn decided to play along with Aiden's charade, pretending to be oblivious while she planned her next move. She began by cutting off his access to her bank accounts and canceling his company credit cards. When Aiden tried to use his card at a restaurant to impress his lover, it was declined repeatedly. Embarrassed and confused, Aiden brushed it off as a technical issue. But the seed of doubt was planted. Evelyn's next step was to remove Aiden from his position at the company, stripping him of the power and influence he had grown accustomed to. When Aiden confronted her about the changes, Evelyn feigned ignorance, blaming the bank for the issues and assuring him that she would sort it out. Meanwhile, Evelyn made arrangements to change her will, ensuring that Aiden would receive nothing from her estate. Instead, she planned to donate her wealth to charities and foundations that supported the causes she cared about, leaving Aiden with nothing. Evelyn knew she was dying. She had been sick with cancer, and as her health got worse, she accepted that she would soon be reunited with her late husband. She wanted Aiden to face the consequences of his actions before she left. A few months later, Evelyn died, leaving behind justice. At her funeral, her will was read. The will said that Evelyn's money would go to charity, and not to Aiden. She left Aiden a small box with a key. Aiden opened the box and found an espresso cup and a note that read, "Enjoy the bitter taste of your own making. With love, Evelyn." Aiden was devastated. He lost everything. The city knew he was deceitful, and he was left with shame and regret. He had dreamed of a life of luxury, but it was now out of reach. He was to blame. Aiden sat alone in his empty apartment. He realized that greed and deception had cost him happiness. Evelyn taught him the most valuable lesson of his life, even in death. Aiden sat in silence, feeling the weight of his actions. He tasted betrayal as he stared at the empty cup. Evelyn's words echoed in his mind, a final reminder of the consequences of his greed. In the weeks that followed, Aiden's life fell apart. People who had admired him shunned him because of his betrayal. He was no longer welcome where he used to be, and he lost the good life he had briefly enjoyed. Aiden went to the cafe where he and Evelyn had met. The place reminded him of his downfall. The baristas no longer greeted him with smiles. Aiden couldn't afford the things he used to have, and even his old friends left him. As time passed, Aiden's situation got worse. He lost his apartment and had to sell what he had left to survive. The woman he was seeing left him when he ran out of money, leaving him isolated. He had no one and nowhere. Aiden was homeless, wandering the streets with nothing but the clothes on his back. He became bitter and realized his mistakes. He threw away a woman's love and trust for money he didn't really need. Aiden found a small church in the city. He went in because he heard music and felt warm inside. The peaceful atmosphere gave him hope. The pastor, Father James, saw Aiden and came over with a smile. "You look like you've been through a lot. Do you want to talk?" Aiden was reluctant to open up, but Father James made him feel at ease. He started to tell his story, the lies, the deceit, the downfall. Father James listened without judging. Aiden went to the church often over the next few weeks. He found comfort and purpose in the community. He volunteered to help with the church's outreach programs, serving meals to the homeless and helping those in need. It was humbling work, but it made him feel fulfilled. As Aiden rebuilt his life, he thought of Evelyn. She gave him a second chance. She saw through his act and helped him learn a lesson he needed to learn. Aiden found peace within himself. He lost everything, but gained humility, compassion, and a desire to make amends. He knew he could never undo the hurt he caused, but he was determined to live honorably. Aiden became a counselor at the church, helping people who had lost their way. He never forgot the lessons and dedicated himself to guiding others away from greed and deceit. Aiden's life of luxury was gone. He had a life of service and humility. But he knew he'd found something more precious. Aiden had found the true meaning of wealth: love, trust, and kindness. Aiden's story ended not with riches, but with redemption, and a woman who showed him the value of the human soul.